Hi, it's Katrina. Today we'll be exploring some new places that were totally hidden until recently. From entire caves sealed for millennia to tunnels and cities that were lost and then found and then lost again. If that sounds good, be sure to subscribe and keep on watching. Cave secret sealed for 40,000 years. Hold on to your seats because you won't believe what scientists have recently found hidden away for 40,000 years. On the Iberian Peninsula near the city of Gibraltar, archaeologists opened up a passageway into a lost subterranean world unlike anything you've ever seen. Investigations began in 2012 with scientists examining Vanguard Cave, one part of the much larger Gorham's Cave complex. They had a hunch that deeper within the cave system were additional passages and chambers that had been plugged by an influx of sand many years ago. It took a decade, but the team finally found what they were looking for. Professor Clive Finlayson from the Gibraltar National Museum discovered a gap in the sediment. With a bit of work, the gap was widened, and once it was big enough to crawl through, the team wormed their way into a humongous hollow space. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like primitive decorations. Slabs of rock lay smashed on the floor. It was clear right away that an earthquake had caused immense damage in the cavern. In an interview with The Guardian, Professor Finlayson said discovering the chamber was like discovering the tomb of Tutankhamun, though without the Egyptian treasures. He couldn't quite describe the feeling of entering into a space that nobody else has entered since before the dawn of civilization. All he said was that it felt quite sobering. I bet it did. Inside the forgotten hollow, there were bones. A lot of bones. Researchers found the remains of lynx, hyena, and griffin vultures. Something had dragged these animals into the cave a long time ago. The team also discovered claw marks on the walls of the cave, which would normally be associated with bears. But the bear bones found strewn on the floor are too small. Right now, nobody is sure what creature was carving the cave with its immense hook-like claws. The big question at the moment is, did Neanderthals occupy the cave in the distant past? Professor Finlayson thinks the answer is yes. Although no Neanderthal bones were discovered, there was one interesting find. A shell was found in the sealed chamber, suggesting that somebody brought it from the sea and placed it in that dark space before it was blocked off. Elsewhere in the cave system, there is a lot of proof of Neanderthal activity. Neanderthals left behind stone tools and butchered animals. The team even discovered the milk tooth of a young Neanderthal child in what looked like a hyena den. They think she was dragged off by a pack of beasts and eaten. Maybe it was a good thing this chamber got sealed off. The secret Condor's passageway. In Peru, archaeologists recently explored a sealed passageway from 3,000 years ago. It wasn't blocked off for quite as long as the cave chamber in Gibraltar, but it's still ancient. The tunnel was built by the Chavin culture, who flourished in Peru more than 2,000 years before the Inca. The archaeological site of Chavin de Huantar is in the middle of what appears to be nowhere at all. It's situated amidst the rolling dirt hills 155 miles north of Lima. And while the landscape is fairly desolate now, it wasn't always the case. In 900 BC, the city was at its peak. This would have been a bustling metropolis surrounded by lush fields, with roads leading to other cities in the kingdom. Within the ruined city is a temple. Inside that temple is a hallway, which nobody noticed until 2022. Archaeologist John Rick believes there was a structural issue that caused the temple hallway to collapse, sealing it tightly. Opening the seal was like cracking open a fresh tomb. Everything beyond was frozen in time. Archaeologists didn't just go bursting in head first, though. This was a delicate operation, and it required a delicate approach. The first thing to do was use cameras mounted on robots to crawl carefully through the debris. Here's an image of the interior of the collapsed passage, courtesy of John Rick. Soon enough, the hallway yielded a treasure. There is still a lot of work to be done, but already archaeologists have an artifact, and it's a doozy. They found a huge piece of ceramic weighing almost 40 pounds. It's decorated with the head of a condor, one of the largest birds in the world. The Chavin culture, and indeed most cultures in ancient Peru, associated the humongous bird with power. The condor was to the Chavin culture what the bald eagle is to American culture today. The rock tombs of Lysia. The rock tombs of Lysia are unlike anything else in the world. The mysterious tombs are carved into the rocky cliffs of Anatolia's southwest coast, along with the eastern Greek islands. There isn't just one location. Instead, the tombs are spread out across a vast area. They were made by an ancient civilization more than 2,500 years old. The Lysians were incredibly unique. They were independent, proud, had their own language, their own writing system, and their own way of doing things. They were kind of like the rebels of the Bronze Age, a great group of seafaring people who left their mark across the Mediterranean. They might still be around today if it hadn't been for those pesky Greeks. The Lysians appeared around 2000 BC, only to be assimilated by the Greeks and the Romans. By 200 BC, the Lysian language had disappeared entirely. The overwhelming influence of the Greeks caused the Lysians to slowly replace their native tongue with Standard Greek. The Lysians had a very sophisticated democratic system, which divided their territory into a federation known as the Lysian League. Each city was like a state with its own local government. Each city also had a representative in a central assembly, which worked to agree on matters of national security and foreign policy. Then there was their religion. The Lysians shared a lot of gods and goddesses with their neighbors. They worshipped Apollo, Greek god of the sun, and Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt. But they also worshipped their own gods like Sundas, lord of the mountain, and the goddess Kubaba. The Lysians believed in commemorating their dead in a big way. Their rock-hewn tombs are awe-inspiring to see with your own eyes. They cut these huge tombs into the faces of sheer rock walls with uncanny precision. Looking at pictures of them, just like this one here, it almost looks as if they had a giant cookie cutter that they pressed into the rock. That's how perfect and symmetrical the tombs are, even after 2,400 years of erosion. There are two main kinds, house-style tombs and temple-style tombs. They were made to look like traditional Lysian houses or temples from the front, with huge pillars and steeped roofs. These were often extremely decorated, usually with mythical scenes and legendary animals. Not all of the rock-cut tombs are sealed, with most of them empty because they were looted long ago. But every now and again, a tomb is discovered with its door fully sealed, meaning that nobody has entered since the day it was built. One such tomb was blown open by looters in 2021. It happened in Turkey's Antalya province. Modern-day tomb raiders used explosives to blast open the entrance of a rock-cut tomb that had been closed for the last 2,500 years. It was utterly devastating for archaeologists and for the locals who treasure their ancestors' secrets. Sadly, they appear to have stolen everything inside. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Candy McGraw and Natalie Flanagan for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Going back for seconds, sometimes archaeological wonders are buried and forgotten, and sometimes it takes a bit of good luck to find them again. 170 years ago, laborers in Scotland discovered an unprecedented hoard of silver. They looted what they could and wanted to dig for more, but they were under intense pressure by their bosses to turn the barren field into farmland. They had no choice but to keep working, leaving what could have been a huge payday lost underneath the field. Today, there are only 3 pieces of the original silver hoard still left. Nobody knows where all the other pieces went, though they were presumably sold by the laborers who found them. If you were stuck digging up plots of land in 1838 and found silver treasure, you'd sell it too. Recently, archaeologists decided to give it another shot. The original discovery was lost, but they knew roughly where it had been made. A team from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland journeyed to Leigh Farm in Aberdeenshire and started digging. They found 100 silver items, all of them from the days of the Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries. The team uncovered coins, bracelets, and pieces of jewelry. They also found silver dish fragments, belt fittings, and some spoon handles. All of them are excellent relics from when the British Isles were controlled by the might of Rome. Lead researcher Gordon Noble said the team wanted to learn more about the context of the original find. They were thinking there could be more silver, which there was. But there are also 2 stone circles in the field. One of them dates to the Neolithic era, while the other is from the Bronze Age. These things are way older than the silver, dating to before 1670 BC. As for the silver, it almost definitely belonged to some powerful members of Roman society, although Gordon did note that the silver could be post-Roman, having been recycled for high-status members of new societies forming as the Roman Empire collapsed. Either way, silver was never mined in Scotland during the Roman period. It only came from the mainland, only collected by those of extreme wealth. The tomb of Cerberus. Archaeologists in Italy unearthed an ancient tomb that features one of the most incredible frescoes anyone has ever seen. Within the burial chamber, lost for the last 2,000 years, is a huge painted image of Cerberus, the legendary 3-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. This phenomenal discovery was made in the suburb of Naples called Giugliano. The suburb is home to some farming properties, and archaeologists were called to carry out a survey prior to some routine city maintenance work. All pretty boring. They were just updating the water system. In a city like Naples, built upon the bones of countless ages, surveys are necessary before any major work gets done. Beneath the surface of the field, there turned out to be burial sites. Quite a few of them are from the era of the Roman Republic, between 510 and 31 BC. There are also some burials from the days of the Roman Empire, which started in 31 BC and ended rather stupendously in 476 AD. The Cerberus tomb is the best, its walls in pristine condition. On one side of Cerberus is a nude, savage man wielding a wooden club like a Stone Age barbarian. On the other side of the 3-headed beast is a much more refined gentleman with a winged hat. These 2 characters are Hercules and Hermes, and I'm thinking you can likely guess which is which. The amazing mural is a representation of Hercules' 12th labor. He descended into the black depths of the Greek underworld, guided by the god Hermes to capture Cerberus. While Hercules' labor is the most epic scene, there are others inside the tomb. One panel shows a weird centaur mermaid creature known as the Centaur. Even D&D fans probably haven't heard of this thing before. It had, according to Greek myths, the upper body of a human, the front 2 legs of a horse, and a fishtail sticking out of its rear end. But just whose sealed chamber was this? That is the major question right now. In order to get inside, archaeologists had to remove the tiles covering an opening in the ceiling. The doorway itself had been shut tight with a massive slab of porous rock. Sadly, they can't tell you who was buried in the tomb. The discovery was only just announced in 2023, last year, so give it a little more time. As soon as I know more, I'll be telling you all about it. Wine jars sealed for 5,000 years. I've shown you caves and tunnels sealed for thousands of years. Now I want to show you some wine jars discovered in an Egyptian tomb sealed for the last 5 millennia. These ancient jars haven't been opened since before the pyramids were built. And yes, they still have wine in them. There's one other thing I should quickly mention. The wine jars were found in the tomb of Queen Meret Neith, believed to be the first female pharaoh in Egyptian history. She was kind of a big deal, yet hardly anyone today remembers she existed. A group of scientists from the University of Vienna investigated a huge complex of mud bricks, clay, and wood. The complex is in Abydos, Egypt. 5,000 years ago, Abydos was one of the most advanced cities in the world. Although many aren't familiar with Abydos, today it's considered the most important archaeological site in Egypt by the experts. It was in Abydos where the earliest temples were built, and where the earliest pharaohs were entombed. Abydos was the first beating heart of Egypt, where legend has it the gods came from the heavens to rule over human society. Professor Christiana Kohler said the researchers were astonished by the excellent preservation of what they discovered in the ancient complex. They found grape seeds, perfectly sealed wine jars, and even human footprints fossilized in the mud. The wine jars still had wine in them, but it's not as enticing as it might seem. Here's a picture of the jars from the University of Vienna. As you can see, they lie scattered at the bottom of a dirt pit. They don't look particularly delicious. However, there is still residue and tartar crystals inside. You could lick the walls of the jars if you really wanted to, but it wouldn't taste very good. I would recommend that instead of doing that, waiting until the scientific analysis is done. Once researchers recreate the ancient Egyptian recipe for this 5,000-year-old wine, maybe someone will make a few bottles. Now let's take a closer look at Meret Neith. Inscriptions found within her tomb show that she held a key government position. She managed the royal treasury, and she may have also been the pharaoh, although it's not 100% confirmed yet. Margaret Maitland from National Museum Scotland said Meret Neith possessed an unusual level of authority for a woman. She also happened to have been buried with 41 courtiers and servants. This was something normally reserved for kings and queens. Most ancient Egyptians couldn't really convince 41 servants to die alongside them just to offer company in the afterlife. Lost and found after 500 years. We've all lost something important to us, be it your phone, a piece of jewelry, or maybe even your child at the grocery store. I'm just kidding about the last one. 500 years ago in Sweden, somebody lost a ring that must have meant a lot to them. It remained missing until now. Kalmar is a medieval city with a dark past, located on the coast of southwest Sweden. There have been a ton of archaeological investigations done here, with one of the most recent unveiling 10 streets, fragments of an old city wall, cellars, buildings, and a myriad of objects. The artifacts recovered date from between 1250 to 1650. People still live in the city of Kalmar. It's a beautiful historic place, a hidden jewel with hardly any tourists, but it was almost destroyed during a battle in the 1600s, which saw it burn to the ground. It was a big bummer, to say the least, for the people living in the city. That said, the burning did leave traces of the old town buried in an incredible state of preservation. This has helped modern researchers learn more about medieval Swedes. They've been able to find out what they drank, what they ate, and how they transitioned out of the Middle Ages. Which brings me to the gold ring, a small but spectacular piece of jewelry discovered in near-perfect condition. Even though it was made in the 15th century, the ring looks like it was only worn for a few days. Carved on the front of the ring is Jesus Christ. Its size suggests it was worn by a woman. Whoever wore this ring most likely lost it. Archaeologists think the owner must have been extremely unlucky. They presumably had just purchased the ring. It was still new, and then they dropped it. The ring got buried underneath the city like a piece of discarded pottery. You have to wonder if the owner of the ring didn't go the rest of their life kicking themselves for losing something that would have been worth so much. The Canaanite Arch of Mystery. At the end of a sealed passageway in Israel, archaeologists found something that nobody had anticipated. They came across the ruins of an old Canaanite arch that they believe was used by a cult. There is a lot to unpack here, so I better start 3,800 years ago. That was when the Canaanite arch and attached vaulted stairway got sealed inside a mud brick building. Here's a picture of the staircase from the dig site at Tel Shimron by Icon. You can see the backfill blocking the way down, sealing the passage. The arch itself is in ruins and buried, with only bits of it recognizable. It originally stood 16 feet tall. Mario Martin, the director of excavation at Tel Shimron, said it took 9,000 bricks to build. I haven't even gotten to the mystery yet. Archaeologists were able to date the stairway and the arch, learning they had been sealed inside the underground corridor only about a generation after they were built. They were also buried on purpose. Archaeologists are struggling to understand why the Canaanites went through so much work to seal the arch away. To understand, you need to know a little bit more about the Canaanites. They were the people who lived in Israel 4,000 years ago, a millennia before the events of the Bible. They weren't one single ethnic group. Ann Kilbrew from Penn State University said Canaan was made up of a diverse population. They practiced different customs and had different cults. What the Bible says is that when the Israelites arrived in the Promised Land, they had to defeat the Canaanites to claim it. The Bible also tells us about the false idols worshipped by the Canaanites. Gods like Arse, Asherah, Malakbel, Aglibol, and Baal himself. And let's not forget Molech, god of child sacrifice. Archaeologists think the sealed arch was used in cultic rituals, maybe in one ritual so heinous that they tried to remove all evidence of it. Within the buried passageway was a bowl, which was used in ritual offerings. Plus, other excavations turned up around 30,000 animal bones, which likely belonged to creatures that were sacrificed to gods. For now, archaeologists are quietly getting rid of the mystery. They have already reburied the passageway and the arch. The mural of the century. More than 100 years after archaeologists found and lost an epic ancient mural in northern Peru, it has resurfaced. How do you lose a mural? It's surprisingly easier than you might think. Hans Heinrich Brüning discovered the mural in the ruins of the Huaca Pintada temple and took a black and white photograph of it in 1916. Brüning was in Peru studying the mysterious Moche culture. He was such a driving force of early archaeology in Peru that he has a museum dedicated in his honor in the city of Lambayeque. So the German photographed the mural and then got distracted. These kinds of things happen. Let's not be too harsh. While he was distracted, a bush grew. The bush grew and grew until it covered the painting, obscuring it for the next century as archaeologists failed to find it again. Then came Sam Gavami, a German archaeologist from the University of Freiburg. He rediscovered the lost mural and was able to date it to 1,000 years old. Sam thinks the painting is a combination of Moche and Lambayeque styles, making it a truly unique piece of artwork. Here's a picture of it, or at least what's left of it, from Sam Gavami. Nobody is sure what the mural shows, though Sam guessed it has something to do with the ancestors of the Moche and their intimate links with the forces of nature. The Lost Golden City. It's very rare that an entire city goes missing, but it does happen. In Egypt, one such city was discovered after having been forgotten for 3,400 years. Archaeologists are calling it the Lost Golden City, saying it's the most important find since the tomb of King Tut. The discovery was made by a dedicated team of Egyptian archaeologists. A little north of Luxor, in the area once dominated by the tall buildings of Thebes, researchers found the site. They think it was an industrial city, perhaps dedicated to manufacturing things like furniture and pottery. Inscriptions found on clay caps of wine date the metropolis to the 18th dynasty, to between 1386 and 1353 BC. That was the rule of Amenhotep III, a pharaoh who didn't see as much action as other rulers when it came to war. Amenhotep was more about cash than fighting. He ruled during a remarkably prosperous era. Egypt reached the peak of its power, with more money flooding the kingdom than the pharaoh knew what to do with. Sadly for Amenhotep, he suffered from obesity, arthritis, and abscesses in his teeth. He died around the age of 40, with scientists suspecting all that wealth resulted in an unhealthy diet. Amenhotep potentially ate himself into an early grave. Even though he died relatively young, there are more surviving statues of Amenhotep than any other pharaoh. His body was found in the Valley of the Kings in 1889. When Amenhotep died, the Egyptian throne was passed on to his second son, Amenhotep IV. When he became king, he changed his name to Akhenaten and married Queen Nefertiti. Akhenaten was one of the weirdest rulers that Egypt ever had. Some people think he was an alien. The alien hypothesis originates because of two major things. First, Akhenaten kind of did look like an extraterrestrial. You have to admit it's true. Carvings, statues, and paintings of Akhenaten make him look sort of androgynous, and like he had an extremely long skull. He really gave off some E.T. vibes, like maybe he was into abductions and things. The other thing Akhenaten did was rebel against the Egyptian gods. For thousands of years, the Egyptians had worshipped their pantheon of unique deities. Akhenaten suddenly put a stop to it, forcing everyone to worship one new god named Aten. Some scholars think this was the start of a monotheistic cult, one that would lead to Judaism and Christianity, though it's only speculation. Akhenaten moved the capital from Thebes to the new city of Amarna, which was discovered when Napoleon Bonaparte entered Egypt in the 18th century. Nobody is sure why Akhenaten moved the capital, though there is one potential reason that makes sense. The priests of Amun held great sway in Egyptian culture. They were like the bishops of the Vatican, wielding enormous influence. Akhenaten likely wanted to build a new city to separate himself from those priests, who were centered in the temples of Thebes. Alas, it was a failure. Akhenaten died, and his son King Tut took his throne. King Tut immediately changed the capital to Memphis, ordered more temples to be built in Thebes, and restored the old gods. What does all of this have to do with the lost Golden City? It all has to do with it. The newly found city lost beneath the desert sands is a snapshot in time. Salima Ikram from the American University in Cairo told National Geographic it's the Egyptian version of Pompeii. Excavations are still ongoing with much that needs to be done, but archaeologists are determined to solve the mystery. The city was abandoned at the exact same time the capital was relocated to Amarna by Akhenaten in 1348 BC. Then it appears to have never been populated again. Something crazy happened here 3,500 years ago, and the truth is beneath the desert. Secret Paris skeletons in the underground. During all the road work and digging that took place during the construction of Paris's Port Royal station in the 1970s, one thing remained untouched. Just a few feet from the very busy Parisian train station, an ancient necropolis went unfound. It was only inches from work boots, hammers, and shovels, yet nobody found the place. It was kind of a miracle. Now that's all changed. Scientists have uncovered the necropolis and its 50 graves in the heart of Paris. It's an incredible find, one that offers a glimpse into the little-known history of Paris's predecessor. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the city of Lutetia stood in the center of the French capital. Lutetia was initially a Gallic Roman town under control of the Roman Empire. The shocking discovery started with plans for a new exit at the train station. The National Institute of Preventive Archaeological Research was called in to conduct an archaeological survey. The survey revealed burials at the Saint Jacques necropolis from the 2nd century AD. This necropolis was partially excavated in the 1800s, but never fully. Anthropologist Camille Colonna said there were suspicions that the train station might be hiding more of the necropolis, but they didn't know for sure. Here's the other issue with the necropolis. In the 1800s, the good stuff was taken from graves. Skeletons and burial offerings were looted. Everything that didn't look like it was worthwhile got left where it was. Then the necropolis was covered in dirt, and the bulk of it is still lost underneath Paris. This particular section is pristine. Archaeologist Dominique Garcia said nobody has seen these graves since antiquity. They were sealed as if shrink-wrapped by the earth itself. Plus, they haven't been looted. One of the first graves they revealed contained an 1,800-year-old skeleton with a coin in its mouth. This was payment for Charon, the ferryman who took the recently deceased across the river Styx and into Hades. The ancient people called such a coin Charon's obol. The Assyrian City archaeologists lost. Archaeologists discovered an ancient Assyrian city and then lost it again, although it wasn't entirely their fault. In the 1990s, the Turkish government agreed they would build the Ilisu Dam. Construction began on the edge of the Tigris River in the southeast of the country. 6 years ago, the dam was complete, and flooding of a huge tract of land behind it began. It was a good thing because the dam would provide water security and electricity to the locals. At the same time, it was bad because the flood was going to displace 70,000 people and destroy 500 archaeological sites. The Turkish government knew what they were doing, so starting in the 90s, they had international archaeologists scramble to make all the discoveries they could. There were a bunch of survey projects and over 20 major excavations. Sites were found from the Ottoman era to the days of the Assyrians 3,000 years ago. One of the greatest things discovered was the lost city of Tushan, a provincial center for nearly 300 years. It was never as fabulous as the capital of Nineveh, but it was still a big city. Tushan stood from about 882 to 611 BC. Archaeological work began in 1997 and continued for the next 18 years. Archaeologists uncovered the forgotten palace that was built during the rule of King Ashur-nasir-pal II. Perhaps you've heard of him. He also had a palace at Nimrud. The throne room was taken from the ruins in Nimrud and put on display at the British Museum. Not just the throne, the entire room. When the Babylonians teamed up with the Medes and attacked Nineveh in 612 BC, the Assyrians were doomed. The surviving forces fled to the city of Haran, where they made their last stand and were defeated. During the march up the river, the Babylonians destroyed Tushan, just for the fun of it. Now, archaeologists have lost access to Tushan. True, they had almost 20 years to study it, but even if they had 40 years, it wouldn't have been enough. The information they learned is preserved for perpetuity in archives and publications. The city itself is gradually being flooded. The water from the Ilisu Dam is on the exact same warpath taken by the Babylonians 2,600 years ago. It seems like history is repeating itself. Thanks for watching. Which discovery did you love the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and stick around for more content you might have missed. Bye!
The Midnight Terror Cave. It was just before midnight on a warm evening in 2006 when a Mennonite farmer living in western Belize heard the cries of a man in the distance. This man had fallen into a cave and was badly hurt. It turns out he was a looter, and he had been drawn to the cave in search of Maya artifacts that he wanted to sell on the black market. Well, he fell into a cave ripe with artifacts. They just weren't exactly the type he was looking for. Rather than coming across jewels and pieces of gold, he discovered a treasure trove of bones and human skulls spread across the cave floor. These skeletons belonged to humans who had been sacrificed about 1,000 years ago. An archaeological expedition went to the cave in 2008, led by James Brady from California. The farmer who found the screaming looter had dubbed the place the Midnight Terror Cave, and that's what scientists are still calling it. Not long into their investigation, they realized they were dealing with a major site of ritual sacrifice in the days of the Maya. They found what can only be described as an astonishing number of human bones. Over 10,000 bones were found littering the cave, with many of them having belonged to children between the ages of 6 and 14. However, we are not sure why the Midnight Terror Cave was such an important place of sacrifice for the Maya. They didn't exactly write down the details of why they were killing so many innocent people inside the cave, offering the dead to their gods. But whatever their reason, it must have been intense. Would you be brave enough to explore this cave? Let me know if you would dare. Tam Cang. The underground sanctuary of Tam Cang is located in the old Thai town of Phetchaburi. From the blistering heat of the jungle, one can descend into the depths of the cool, dimly lit cave. It's almost like stepping from one world into another. But it's not the cool shade of the cave that makes it so fascinating, but rather the Buddha statues that occupy the natural cavities in its limestone walls. At the bottom of the cave, visitors are faced with rows and rows of Buddhas. And then, when they get to the bottom, there is a great hallway carved into the rock, with rows of even smaller Buddha statues surrounding it, complemented by a massive image of the Buddha at the very center. Once a day between February and April, the sun shines directly through a sinkhole on the roof of the cavern, beaming light directly onto the largest Buddhist statue. It's quite impressive, especially since the cave is usually empty or watched over by just one monk. This ancient sanctuary was built about a century ago during the rule of King Chulalongkorn. The king originally wanted to build a great temple on the peak of Khao Luang Mountain, but decided it would be more interesting to build it deep in the depths of the cave instead. The only thing we don't know is where all the Buddha statues came from. Most of them were brought to the site by Buddhist pilgrims and could have come from anywhere in the world. Cave of Monsters. In a horrifying cave that was sealed off from the outside world for 5 million years, Dr. Christian Lascu discovered 33 unbelievable monsters. These monsters had been sealed inside Mobile Cave in Romania since the time prehistoric beasts still wandered across the earth. The cave is nothing short of a natural phenomenon. Because it was closed off from the world for so long, no fresh air was able to reach its depths. Eventually, the air within the cave became toxic and horribly humid. Humans can't even walk into this cave without protective equipment or they'll suffocate and die. As you can probably imagine, the life forms that manage to thrive here aren't exactly the cuddliest. So far, scientists have identified 48 different species of creatures living inside the prehistoric time capsule. 33 of them are found in the Mobile Cave and nowhere else on the planet. And I'm talking spiders, scorpions, and centipedes. They've existed in a creepy yet peaceful utopia inside the cave for longer than humans have been alive. Because there is no natural sunlight, the organisms have developed some pretty weird features. Most of them are white or pinkish translucent. None of them have eyeballs. And they've all developed extra long antennae and limbs, so they have an easier time moving around in the dark. What do you think about these creepy crawlies? Let me know in the comments below. The lives of Neanderthals. A cave chamber was discovered in Gibraltar that hadn't been opened for tens of thousands of years. Now, that's nowhere close to 5 million. There were no creepy, crawly monsters, but there were some interesting finds involving our friends, the Neanderthals. It was archaeologists with the Gibraltar National Museum who started digging through the chambers and passages of the Vanguard Cave in 2012. This cave is part of the larger Gorham's Cave Complex, which happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Just about a decade after they started looking through blocked passages, they came upon the most interesting chamber yet. They found a cavern deep in the back of the cave filled with the decayed remains of vultures and lynxes, as well as scratch marks on the walls made by some kind of mysterious cave creature. But they also found the remains of a marine mollusk, which had probably been brought into the chamber by a Neanderthal who once lived here. It's interesting because the mollusk's remains have been dated to 40,000 years ago, the exact time the Neanderthals disappeared, probably pushed into extinction by modern humans. This would have been one of the very last remaining Neanderthals, packing his bounty from the sea back into the deepest and darkest corner of the cave to feast. But experts don't know what could have made the strange scratches on the wall, nor why there were so many ancient remains of vultures. It's all pretty strange. The toothy snail. A newly discovered snail inside of a cave is one of the weirdest scientists have ever found. In northern Spain, Dr. Adrian Jochum and researchers from Germany collected information on 57 gastropod populations. They went into a variety of Spanish caves and documented and analyzed all the snails they could find. And while most of them were already known to science, the one I'm telling you about now is new. The snail is from an entirely new genus, discovered in the Cantabrian Mountains in Spain. They named it Iberozoospium. And while that name is kind of boring, the snail is not. It stands out because it has a transparent shell and a pair of vampire-like pronged teeth in its mouth. But it doesn't use its teeth for killing. It's more like a two-pronged rake to sift through the mud on the bottom of the cave and slurp up food particles. Pretty cool, huh? There's lots of creatures waiting to be discovered if you just have the patience to look. The depths of Mammoth Cave. If you've never heard of Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, you're missing out. It is the longest cave in the world, but apparently it might be even bigger than anyone thought. We already knew that only a small fraction of the cave has ever been mapped or explored, and now researchers believe they've identified an extra 8 miles of passages, making the cave even longer. As for the history of this ancient place, it was first explored by the prehistoric Native Americans about 5,000 years ago. Based on archaeological discoveries in modern times, researchers are confident the Native Americans explored and utilized about 19 miles of cave passages. They didn't push past the surface as they had no need to tunnel down into the bowels of what they must have assumed was hell, but they did sometimes use it as a burial ground. In the 19th century, archaeologists came across Native American remains, most of them mummified by the cold and lifeless air of the cave. In total, there are at least 600 miles of uninterrupted tunnels and passages leading through the dark and damp underground. There are over 200 caves connected via these tunnels and passages, all carved by thousands of years of soft limestone dissolved by rain and raging underground rivers. Out of the enormous amount of underground tunnels, 420 miles of them are completely unexplored. Have you ever been to Mammoth Cave? What was your experience like? Let us know in the comments below. The Beer Cave. A cave that had been lost to time was just recently rediscovered in a St. Louis neighborhood. As you might already know, Missouri is home to 6,400 caves. It's the most famous state for caving and underground adventures. Plenty of those caves happen to be located right underneath the city streets of St. Louis. If you're familiar with the city, you'll probably know about its long history of beer making. So it only makes sense that brewing and caving go hand in hand. Bill Krantz of McHose and English Cave Recovery was behind this most recent discovery. He and his team lowered a special LiDAR scanning unit down into the cave to map out its depths. The issue was that the cave's entrance had collapsed a long time ago, so there was no way into the place. Bill had to drill a hole and stick his scanning device through it. As it turned out, the cave is quite small, only about 30 feet wide and 15 feet tall. It had been sealed for around 100 years. But before that, it had a variety of uses. The team was able to see that the cave had not only been used for storing ale and brewing beer, but also for farming mushrooms and as a wine grotto. City records show the cave had even been used as a community garden before it eventually collapsed. What's cool is that this is just one of the dozens of caves hidden underneath St. Louis, many of them used for brewing beer and storing ale. This goes back to the 1800s, when locals in Missouri realized natural caves made great cellars for beer storage. There's probably a lot more beer waiting to be found. The Lair of Hercules. The Lair of Hercules is supposedly located in the mysterious caves of Karaftu in modern Iran. The caves are over 6,500 feet above sea level and have seen a lot over the years. They were almost certainly occupied by a garrison of Seleucid fighters from the Seleucid Empire that ruled the region after Alexander the Great died in 323 BC. Hundreds of years later, the caves were likely used as rest stops for weary merchants moving along the Silk Road from China to Europe. But by far, the most interesting thing ever discovered in the caves of Kharaftu is a simple inscription written in Greek. It was found in the 19th century by European explorers and was translated to read, "Here is the home of Hercules. Whoever enters this cave will be safe." It's difficult to know exactly what was meant by the inscription. Was this the home of a person named Hercules? Or was this cave somehow tied to the mythical figure of Hercules? Nobody knows, but it had great significance to someone 2,000 years ago. Do you think that Hercules was an actual person or just a myth? Let me know in the comments. A new species of human. An entirely new species of human was discovered deep in a cave in the Philippines. Foot and hand bones, as well as some teeth and a partial leg bone, were uncovered in Callao Cave, belonging to a previously undiscovered creature. This creature lived on the Philippine island of Luzon sometime between 50,000 and 67,000 years ago. That's about the same time our human ancestors were leaving Africa. The creatures, ancient offshoots of humans, were very real hobbits like from the Lord of the Rings. Based on the bone structure, scientists confirmed them to be a maximum of about 3 feet tall. They weren't exactly a direct ancestor of humans, but a kind of cousin species. In other words, they took a slightly different evolutionary route away from ancient primates on their way to humanity. But they never made it. They evolved into human-like dwarves who lived in caves, a kind of pygmy human species. Then they went extinct for an unknown reason. They never even made it off the island, at least not according to the archaeological evidence. They appear to have been restricted to this one small piece of land, which could explain why they just kind of faded away. The Lascal cave paintings. It was in September of 1940 that 4 French teenagers wandered into a cave and made a shocking discovery. It happened in the woods near the village of Montignac when the kids allegedly lost their dog and went searching for it. Looking for their lost friend brought them to a secret tunnel and a gaping hole in the ground, where they thought they might be able to find buried treasure. What they found instead, after descending a narrow shaft about 50 feet into the earth, was a cave with its walls covered in unbelievable paintings. News of the cave spread, and it wasn't long before archaeologists and anthropologists started investigating. The cave turned out to be one of the largest prehistoric galleries on the planet. Many of the paintings within the French cave date back to 15,000 BC, or 17,000 years ago. They show extinct species of bulls called aurochs, ancient massive horses, and strange figures of a man with the head of a bird. It's believed ancient shamans carried out rituals inside the cave, and the locals left their knowledge on its walls in the form of paintings. Sadly, the thousands of early visitors to the Lascal caves damaged and erased much of the artwork. The atmosphere inside the cave is so thick that many visitors fainted. All the breathing created moisture, mold developed, and installed artificial lighting caused the paintings to fade. The cave was finally closed to the public in 1963, but by then much of the artwork was already heavily damaged. Would you ever wander into a strange dark cave that you found in the woods? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon! Bye!